52. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Delighted to see you here. So today what we are doing is connecting the dots. So this is a series connecting the dots. And what we're trying to do is that we're looking at comprehensivist ideas. What we're doing is that we are looking at comprehensivist ideas, ideas that allow us to go across fields, to think in a transdisciplinary way. Okay, that's what we're looking at. And we're going to try to connect all those ideas. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. Fair enough? All right, so let's get started. So what ideas have you found useful that allow you to go across different fields? So I have listed some of them that we have discussed in these comprehensivist meetups. Okay, so why don't you type in the chat ideas? You know, I'll actually, Joe, can you do me a favor? Can you go to the meetup page and just cut and paste those ideas?
Yes, no problem. Sorry, my internet's a little slow.
No problem. Take your time. So folks, go ahead and type in. So I'm going to read them out. This is the list I have. Okay, this is not a comprehensive list. This is just list of ideas that we have discussed in the past in these meetups. So first is form follows function from Louis Sullivan. Then it's macro-comprehensive, micro-incisive. This is Buckminster Fuller's idea. Then you've got the idea of embracing ignorance. Next one is great traditions of inquiry and action. This is a presentation by CJ. Syntopical reading, that is Mortimer Adler's idea. OODA Loop, that's John Boyd. Inductive attitude, this was the lecture by, I will handle all letting people in, okay? So inductive attitude, which is the idea of, I think Polya, that is, you know, having the of looking, basically looking for integrations and being ready to update. Of course, connected with that is the Bayes rule. Next one is going to be synergy. This is again Buckminster Fuller's idea. Next one is learn by teaching. Next one is multiple working hypothesis, having kind of parallel hypotheses that you're processing at the same time. Next one is systems thinking. So these are the ones that I had that we've talked about as being useful in thinking across different disciplines. Now, my first question to everybody is, what do you find useful? Which of these ideas, or you can add your own idea. Go ahead and type in the chat. Which of these ideas or any other idea that you find useful in thinking across disciplines? Okay, Joe, go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to give this a shot, but you know, credit to the way you actually listed them out. It really kind of just spoke to me briefly. I was thinking about how micro-incisive and macro-comprehensive and OODA Loop creation and destruction work together, along with systems thinking and questioning. and ignorance, meaning so questioning. So how does that work all together? With micro-incisive, macro-comprehensive, you first take like all possible scenarios, and then you start with the most detailed information and the smallest of details. And that's how you basically start to come up with a problem. You reverse engineer everything. That is using first principles. So you're breaking down the ideas to what it's basic. And using first principles, it's important to ask questions, right? So you're also acknowledging your ignorance in that process. And if you think about it in those terms, if you think about learning as a process, if I were to break something down, learning and teaching are like micro-incisive, macro-comprehensive, micro-incisive. So you could both learn by teaching, you could be taught something and learn, but you could also learn by teaching, and that's how you ask questions. And they're that's a comprehensive way of looking at it, and then you can come up with the best possible scenarios that work for you. The idea of OODA Loop with creation and destruction. So then you have that. It's where you're breaking down concepts into parts, and you take those concepts and you create something new. That is comprehensive thinking, and that's where that still fits in to the whole concept of what Bucky was talking about as well. So the OODA Loop actually and Bucky's concepts both come together for me in how you first approach a problem. And how do you first approach that problem is you start asking questions as to why, and then you start to you start questioning, you examine what are the possibilities, what are the alternatives, and you know, even what are the consequences of something that, but you need to know the whole system. And then so that is also something that was talked about with our systems thinking discussions as well, is thinking about the whole system. And that's another part of that. So thinking in terms of the whole. I know that wasn't very specific, but the example I think with schooling kind of is one example, but the snowmobile is the, you know, how you recreate, you know, take something apart. And I think that that's what Bucky's talking about. He's just talking about it on a grander scale, using it, starting from the universe level and going down to the very specific. So if you think about problems in those terms and how you're approaching them, I think that's been very useful to me. And the other thing that it doesn't permit for is like one of the concepts that, and this comes back to a question that somebody asked Chet Richards initially. The first question that he was asked is about metrics. And the idea is a metrics and dogma and things like that, that John Boyd, you know, couldn't stand, because that doesn't allow you to reinvent things and adjust and adapt. And I think that that's a really important concept as well in understanding all of this, like with whole systems, creation, destruction. So I know that was a little bit kind of all over the place, but there are some key principles in there. So it'd be interesting now to see if you can string them together now that I've just thrown them out all over the place. So, I mean,
yeah,
this is more your going to be your skill set now.
So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to wait for everybody to put everything down, and then let's see what we can do. I mean, the big thing that I see here is, you know, questions, OODA loop, systems, and the macro-micro. Those are the kind of four big things I'm putting down.
And chaos could be in there as well.
Okay.
I mean, something else, but that's a whole separate thing from Jordan Peterson, how that fits in.
Sure. Okay. So we got 5 things down. All right, Judith, And folks, take whatever approach you want to take to this, okay? There is considerable flexibility here. We want to do a lot of back and forth. I really don't know how to approach this. And I want to really hear how each of you approach this. So please, take your time to explicate how you think about it. Judith.
Thank you for saying that, because I was just about to back out of this whole thing after listening to Joe, because I don't know that I can connect specific dots like that. But Shrikant, I did want you to know that like connecting a lot of dots, and probably will attribute my water bill to that, because my showers are so long doing it. So form follows function. So this morning I listened to your kindergarten chats from July. Very interesting. So all of your meetups are all of these different events, whatever, by different people, are all so interesting in different ways. I'm not sure that I can connect the way Joe just did, but I would like to try to connect in my Judy way.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I was thinking about, so from your list, okay, learning by teaching, I picked out embracing ignorance, form follows function. What I'm getting out of this after a few months of, participating in many of them, is that you've form, okay, your meetup form, you've built a community of learners and teachers, and we come here willingly. Nobody's forcing us, and so everybody's motivated and everybody's getting something out of it. And it's kind of blown me away to see the kinds of people that you do bring in to talk to someone like me. I'm not going to talk for anybody else, but I'm like, why would they want to hear what I have to say? So I've just been so intrigued by this whole thing. So this form follows function, right? And I know I brought this up with the digital life thing and probably everybody thought I was joking, but I really wasn't. I feel like you have stumbled onto something that is very new, a new way of learning. And I feel like so many of the methods we use to learn, learn, so many of the processes we have are archaic now, it seems to me. So our education system, built in the classroom and all of that, I just keep thinking like, what if kids just played for 10 years, and had school buildings after that where they would do like metals and electronics and art and dance and sports and music and woodwork and things like that, and then wouldn't be required, they could willingly learn from this type of environment. So I feel like, there's a million things, you could poke my holes because I'm just thinking about this in the shower, but I just think that there's something there that could be done, especially in the new world that we live in anyway. And when I brought it up before, I was thinking more in terms of our government system and how archaic sometimes and out of touch we are with our politics as people who elect our officials. And I don't understand why it's so crazy an idea to think that if the people that we elect were sort of exposed in a way to have to speak concisely, more concisely than I am right now, and briefly, but think about what they want to say and even not make it a requirement, but they could have their forum if they want it, and then it would be a competitive thing, and then they would talk. And so what I'm saying is I have these ideas in the shower. So what I'm saying is I think that you've stumbled on things and I get it from so Sanjay did neuroscience. He did something very, he's building the brain. He was talking about the brain, and I got such an education in just the science of it. And many of your other topics are more like philosophical, but they weave together, they ground me in something real, and then they let me think more imaginatively in all different topics and art and everything. It's just really just amazing. So I guess my problem is, they say dig deep. dig deep or dig a lot of holes, but I feel like sometimes you allow us to do both. So we can dig deep if we want to, and we can, like I would love to dig in every single hole you have for me, but I can't. So that's my biggest challenge, is choosing where would I like to dig deep and where would I like to just dabble. But it's very interesting, and I think that it's so exciting that it's like something that could be explored. And so that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judith. I really appreciate all the comments. I mean, for me personally, it is all about learning, because I find that there is just so much to be learned, and relatively nothing. And what happens is that each person, we go about our own way. I'm basically, I'll speak for myself. I'm ignorant of most things, and even when whatever I'm doing, I don't even know exactly the nature of it. Like, for example, the comments that you made about what is going on. There are many things about what you said where I'm saying, that's interesting. Because what happens is that it's not because I'm doing this to learn. Okay. And what happens is that each person who comes in, I'm trying to listen to them. I'm not very good at it. Okay. I'm trying to listen to them, and I'm trying to see where are they coming from. And in the process, you see something that you've not seen before. I mean, and it is a community of learners. So the base itself is pretty high in terms of, like, these are self-motivated, all of you guys are self-motivated people who are trying to learn on your own. And you bring all of that, your entire lifetime of learning here. And I think the format is such that it is possible for you to speak. And I find that all these voices, thoughtful voices speaking, is generating most of the value. Everything else is a catalyst. We're putting something in the system in terms of lectures, all of it. But those lectures can be had in a book. You can go read a book, or you can watch a video. But the real value is this rich feedback and commentary that comes in, which explores the topic from many different angles, each person in their own way. And you don't have to be particularly good at something. Even an honest question of saying, why is that? Or something like that can really trigger somebody else's brain cells in a very powerful way. So thank you, Judith. Really appreciate that. Marisa.
Okay, so I'm gonna confess I gave this like 30 minutes to consider. Sorry.
That's great.
What came to mind for me when looking at all of these and trying to pick, what thing comes up. The biggest for me is this concept of the destruction and creation. And I find that we're saying that over and over in many different ways. And it made me think of, I don't know if you're familiar. So I did all the little cheats when I was, learning English and stuff. And SQ3R, that's like a studying technique. And it's survey, question, read, recite, and review. And the cool thing about comprehensivist topics that we've been looking at here is that I feel like what it's giving me is it's taking this like little mnemonic type device that was very, in my mind, it was very small, and it was like, this was for college, this pertained to studying textbooks. Now it's taken it and it said, but wait, why wouldn't you just approach life this way? Mm-hmm. If you're somebody who enjoys learning, why can't everything be a learning experience? And not, I mean, that sounds really simple, and it's not necessarily that it's like something that I never realized. I just don't think I had ever vocalized it. And so, you know, that and the syntopic learning, you know, you say it often, and it's just one of those things where that process of taking this bit that I know from this entirely unrelated subject and pouring it into this different problem on an entirely new subject, that process is not something that is kind of, it's not applauded, it's not celebrated in the normal day-to-day interactions. So it's nice to see it celebrated, as it were, and to realize that, you know what, I used to say so often, oh, I'm a wealth of useless information. I find I'm not comfortable saying that anymore. That's one good thing that's happened for me going to these discussions, is that I don't believe anything I have as knowledge where I understand it is useless anymore. And so that's what you guys have done for me. Thanks, guys. You know, I had this all these random, you know, because I mean, I'm like super, you know, I can walk around and look at weeds in the street and tell you how to make a poultice to, you know, get rid of your eczema with weeds. And that seems like, why on earth would a finance person need to know anything about herbs, right? But I'm no longer, like, it just, I feel like these concepts that we've been looking at are giving me the tools that I didn't know I needed to start kind of owning some of the things I'm already doing. Like, you know, the structure, unstructure, and, you know, you look at the concepts of uncertainty and disorder, and making our peace with this destructive force being a valid part of the creative process it's so helpful to be reminded of that, because it also includes, you know, something that's kind of near and dear to me, and I've always struggled on how to interject it, is the idea of how does one encourage people that they need to both embrace their community and their culture and embrace even more fiercely their individuality. And so that's, you know, my personal little goal in the world, is to shout that out to everyone I meet somehow. And I still don't have that perfect one sentence that does that. But I feel that looking at these things, like, you know, all of them, all of the list here, if I go into that list, I could technically point out how each one does that. And I find that to be fascinating. And I actually think that there is like the beauty of this concept of comprehensivism. That is, what it's saying to us is, if you understand what your base goal is, and actually Boyd said that, you know, he identified for us this beautiful summary of what the actual goal was. And it was just like this, you know, super one simple sentence that was encased in this really almost technical essay. And I think the concept of comprehensivism is saying to me that, you know, if I solidify the message that I want to put forth, I could technically use any technique presented to me, and the more techniques I gather and I understand, the easier it is for me to switch so that I'm a little bit closer to your channel. Because, you know, communication is only communication if the message is both sent and received, right? And that received part is what we struggle with the most. And so the more stuff I gather, the better my tweaking mechanism to get on your wavelength. And that's what I get out of this. Thanks, guys.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Laura, followed by Andrew. Laura. Laura, what ideas have you found useful in thinking in a comprehensivist way? You need to unmute yourself. Okay. Let's go with Andrew first. Andrew, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there some of these fall into a similar heading, and those include, well, all right, let me step back for a second. So I see some of these falling under the heading of discovery and continual refinement of our conceptual models. And, you know, that's something that I enjoy doing, basically firming up our understanding of how things are. So we have obviously the learn by teaching. So I'm going to talk about how each of the following elements are include this idea of developing your conceptual or refining your conceptual model. The learn by teaching, well, teaching requires you to order your knowledge. It requires you to, by getting prepared to teach, you discover your weaknesses and your inconsistencies. And that's kind of that loop of saying, hey, wait a second, I thought I had an understanding of how something is. I need to go through this process, identify what it is, understand, and it's kind of this loop, right, of continual refinement of understanding. And part of that is embracing multiple working hypotheses, right? It's a consideration of possibilities that obviously, you hadn't previously considered. And embracing ignorance is certainly part of that, because that's about welcoming new ideas. So it's, the continual learning, integration, refinement. And I do want to say, kind of following on what someone else said, as far as the role of this meetup, all of this requires discovery, and a major way, and this is on my list of values, for a long time. Engagement is so important, and that's one of the things that this is really this meetup is bringing. So this put meetup on the list of these items and see how that connects everything.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so that's my story. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Does anybody else, what about others? What ideas do you find useful in thinking in a comprehensivist way of going across fields? Would anybody like to chime in? Joe, go ahead.
I'll just say really quickly, just building on what Andrew, he just triggered another thought. Is the idea.
Your sound is very.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. Yeah,
that's good.
A little
Yeah.
bit better. No, Andrew just triggered another idea, was the idea of challenging maps and challenging our concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And with that's directly related to Boyd's OODA Loop as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that so? And Jordan Peterson's ideas of, challenging what we know about reality,
Mm-hmm.
and our understanding of the world. And then that's kind of like those two concepts seem to directly relate to one another as well.
So I want to say, so folks, please go ahead and volunteer so we can get more thoughts on the table. Kevin, you're next. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about late.
No problem.
Yes, thank you for the list. I'm going to use the map, put a hierarchy way.
Mm-hmm.
The first, then the second, I talk a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
As hierarchy, the first is the belief of mind. And the second category is about methodology of how to think. And tools and techniques is last. For the first one, I would say the biggest one, obviously, for beliefs of mind is embracing the ignorance. That's big. That's if it's hard to see accept that concept of ignorance. We said we have experience, have knowledge, have belief. But here's question would be, is your belief is knowledge? Is your experience enough? Turn to the knowledge. Is it changeable? Can it be approvable? And the second one is from the form follows function. Then the third, systems thinking. And finally is a great tradition of inquiry and action. That's form to the beliefs of mind. The second category on middle is the methodology of the how to think. The first one are like this one, inductive attitude. Why you put the first one? Because our knowledge at school, we learned from deductive way. What for? We like this static. We learn from schools, from teacher, from book. We train it that way. And the second one put is multiple working hypotheses. Nobody got from answer. Multiple choice, only get one. So that's not the way. It's put our kids, especially normally they curious everything. So many possibility. Finally, we got one. They don't agree with, but have no choice. The third one is macro comprehensive and micro-incisive. This one, I would say another actually could be a big category. If you look at micro world and macro world, they work at a similar fashion. If from methodology, let's see, we got a network in the atom, how they connect together, how they form, let's say, cell, how they form the human being or a plant. And then the universal, same thing. They got a network, something we don't know. Even we say that we know the matters, we only know 5%. Another 25% is dark matter. Then the rest of we don't know. But normally we focus on the 5 plus 5%. 25% we don't know yet, dark matter. That's the final category. It's we call it tools technique. I'll put OODA Loop. It's problem solve, anything we can use that loop. Observation, orientation, then decision act. We can use that, keep improve ourselves. The second one, syntopical reading. I like the way. Comparison reading, definitely from different idea. Yeah, this third one, learn by teaching. Yes, one thing is like you cannot build, you don't understand it. Until you teach it, it's absolutely true. Finally, it's synergy, as I understand system integration. Finally, I'm going to pick up two of my top list.
Sure.
It's about inductive attitude. I treat that as art. If you think about it, it's really art. It's make you curious, make yourself thinking self is so beautiful thing in our mind. And here's the choice. We have a choice. Either we choose the growth mindset or fixed mindset. And we either choose rapid transformation over the identity-based habit. That's normally we get used to it. Another one is about the for the methodology choose embrace inductive attitude. I put it's the bottom up. Normally our logic is from top down. We get used to it. It's from top up. It makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to stop here. Going to come back if you need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really like that you've kind of broken it down into categories. Wonderful. All right. Anybody else wants to share any thoughts? Okay. How about we pick one thing and then connect other things to it. And
Jeff wanted to share.
oh, Jeff, go ahead.
Laura's back also.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't know why I'm not seeing them. Let me see. Jeff, you had something? Okay, I don't see Jeff. Huh.
That's okay. I was just struggling with the technology there for a
Okay,
second.
go ahead.
Entirely my fault.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, good Lord, Shrikant, you know, this is quite an invitation and a challenge. So, you know, I do have it all here on paper, so I'll give it a try.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I begin with, you know, I don't know what I don't know. So stay curious.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads me to embrace ignorance and try to ask the best questions I can and keep asking. Some might say keep, you know, inflicting, but nonetheless, you know, I try to keep asking the best questions I can. And that really does lead to letting ideas be destroyed. And because the more questions you ask, you know, the greater you begin to take things apart. And one of the things that I was very impressed with, and I'm really happy to remember here in your list, is the idea of entertaining multiple working hypotheses. I'm very impressed with that. It's almost as though there's some sort of an instinct to consider things just one at a time, or as if one thing was going to be the single right answer. And that is among the things that I have let be destroyed. That, you know, but nonetheless, ultimately, you do come to search in a theoretical orientation, as Merlin Donald was saying. You know, well, what's your theory about this? And which is certainly connected to, you know, CJ's orientation to inquiry and action. But then that leads me right into the OODA loop. You know, there's my theory, those are my observations. Now, let's try that theory out by acting and see what happens. And ultimately, the resolution, or the resolving question is around form follows function. It really is, in the end, it is in a way the so what question. So for better or worse, there's my there's my list.
That's fantastic, Jeff. Thank you. This was just great. Kind of embracing ignorance, asking, you know, keep asking the right, you know, best questions you can. Entertain multiple hypotheses so you don't get fixed onto one, and then use OODA loop, and form follows function as a combination. Beautiful. Thank you. Laura, what ideas of comprehensivism do you find useful? What works for you? You need to unmute yourself, though.
Okay. I actually think it. I think in terms of envisioning new forms of education. I think, and I always think in terms of math, but I really envision using all of this, sort of saying, okay, let's think about how we can think and learn and teach, like from the beginning, brand new, clean slate. And so, you know, I look at ignorance and I think of questions and inquiry and models and function and form. And it's like, it would be a marvelous way to begin new ways of thinking in terms of problem solving, in terms of teachers and educators coming together and using these kinds of just about everything in this as devices for developing new structures of education, new ways of teaching, new forms of inquiry. And I think out of it, I think we could get a very exciting educational model that we could begin to move forward in education finally. No more classrooms, desks, grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, standardized tests showing that, you can go do this and do that. You go on to grade 4 or whatever, but really look at kids evolving over time so that, you develop a profile on them rather than a series of scores. I can see systems working here. I can see form function. I can see, I don't know. I see it all. I see what Jeff just described. I see what Joe described. I see all of it. And I see what has to be is a group of people coming together and having this potpourri, that they can pull from and begin to work with together to thrust themselves into creating something new, starting at ground zero with these kinds of ideas and beginning anew, because that's what we have to do, because education in this country is absolutely in dire need of destruction. It needs to be destroyed. So that's the point of destruction, is that. And then, we're ignorant and we have to start from there and start asking questions and developing theories and, multiple hypotheses as to what might work, and so on down on, as it goes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Really appreciate that. Thanks. So what I would, one thing I want to say is that just imagine that this is a classroom, okay? That we are the kids and we are trying to learn, and let's just do it. It's like we have to figure out how to make the most of it. I think we've made a good start, but I think there is a lot more. And the more we figure out how to do this, the thing is, I don't know really. I have no clue, but I'm just trying to, I think we have something good, and there is a pattern. There are several things underlying it. We kind of see some of it, but I think we should keep experimenting to see what this format can do. I'm trying a big experiment with the Jordan Peterson group, which is on Thursdays, where I want to try to raise it to a completely new level. Taking the discussion at a much higher level by implementing like this 2-stage and stuff like that. So I'm going to try that. I don't know how it's going to work. It has worked beautifully. It worked beautifully in New York in person. And I expect the same thing will happen there. But I think what happens is that, so I would say, Laura, I completely agree with you that, education really needs a complete, reorientation, destruction and creation. But I always think of it as, I don't know whose quote it is, but I love the quote: education is wasted on the young. You have ability to learn when you're an adult, when now your ability to learn is much more than you have. So let's figure that out, and then maybe we can take some of the pieces and I think move it down. That's how I'm thinking about it. But great comments, Laura, and I really like your passion for education. So appreciate that. Thank you. Next up is Stephen, and then Mushki. Stephen.
Looking at your list of the past sessions, for me, the fundamental one feels like multiple working hypotheses. Admittedly, I see embracing ignorance as fairly closely related. I think the biggest issue is I feel like I've run across too many people that know the way to do things. And if nothing ever changes and it's an early constrained situation, that may get things done, but typically the world changes more often. And to me, it feels like the issue is not there is one single right way to do things, but different ways may work in different situations. And arguably, you can do anything if you can live with the consequences. So the real question is, what are your alternatives and which one is really going to get you the best results? So if you're trying to check the situation, you consider alternatives, you necessarily have to deny certainty or embrace a certain level of ignorance. In that respect, the inductive attitude I also see as being closely related. Okay, we might be trying to put our experts into little boxes, but typically there's overlap. So if you can look at experience in related fields or look at methods in other circumstances, again, it will give you more hypotheses and more alternatives to choose. So yeah, I'm a big fan of, I would call it multiple hypotheses as opposed to monotheism.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just wanted to point out that if you look at what we do here, right, where each of us is actually putting forth their hypothesis of what is the structure. And we do that all the time. That's kind of part of the structure of the meetup itself, where we are actually listening to different people's take on a particular topic and considering it. So that is a way of actually implementing multiple hypotheses. I just thought of it. Thank you. Next up is Mushki.
Hi, I really only have a few quick thoughts. So
Please.
I'm gonna be honest, and like I messaged Shikrant, like I was wondering maybe if I should leave. I was thinking because I feel that I don't know so many things, and this got me on the topic of embracing ignorance. And until now, I was looking at my ignorance as like something I have to accept. Like, oh, I know. Like if I feel, for example, that I know less than most people here, I feel sometimes like I have to run away. I've left many meetings. But now I'm thinking like I want to learn, I want to be here. So that's what it means to embrace ignorance. It means to swallow your pride and be okay with knowing less than most people in the group and just embracing it as a means of learning. And I was also thinking about the topic of learning through teaching. And many times I feel like, you know, that my knowledge is limited and I don't have what to offer people. But there's so much I gain when I do share whatever knowledge I have with others. I also gain from that, even if it feels like the people are more knowledgeable, the people I'm discussing it with. And also I had the idea that like the more it's important to like you learn when you teach. When you teach, you learn how little you know. That connects the idea of embracing ignorance. Like when you teach to others, you realize, oh, my knowledge is more limited than I had thought, and I have what to learn. Those two topics are connected. I don't really know how to connect everything. I just wanted to give a few thoughts I had about like the idea of embracing. I'm thinking of actually like hugging, like actually embracing ignorance instead of just like begrudgingly accepting it, so that I could actually learn.
Yes, Mushki, that was great. Thank you. And the thing is that, I mean, I would say several things. One is that it's never relative. You know, it's like you are, you know, I am what I am. I know very little. And it's more, I think the most damaging thing that I've done in my life is to think that I know something when I don't know it, because that really stops you. So kind of admitting ignorance and embracing ignorance, I think embracing is better, is really, really useful, because what it does is that it stops you from wasting your energy in all kinds of pretenses. There is, I mean, there is this entire phenomena of biases, of you're trying to hold on to your pride, your, you know, you think you know something, and kind of relentlessly being honest, I think that is far more powerful than whatever knowledge that you have, because that is the thing that is going to get you to the next level. And I made that mistake. I make that mistake a lot of knowing something when I don't know it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. All right, let's see. Now what I want to do is I want to take one idea and connect it to other ideas. Let's see how that goes. I want to start with the OODA loop, because something remarkable, I don't know if you did not watch the presentation by Chuck Spinney. I mean, that was really almost at a historic level, because that is the presentation that is actually the progeny of the presentation that John Boyd used to give to the Marines and to the military, that enabled him to change Pentagon and change the way in which US military fights, to be able to operate in a fast changing situation like insurgents, stuff like that, or Vietnam War. His ideas are the reason why the first Gulf War was far more effective, 100 times more effective than the Vietnam War. So that's what it is. And Chuck Spinney has given the same presentation he gave us, he's given to the Marines, and dozens of times, and Marines just love it. And so does US Naval Academy, has been given. So he actually gave that presentation. So if you missed that, please go ahead and put it. Joe, would you do me a favor, and can you put a link to that in the chat?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I'm very pleased to note that Chuck was very happy. By the way, all the great authors who come and speak here are really happy with you guys. Okay, they're really, really happy with you guys, because they say, I mean, the same thing, like, Merlin Donald was here, just a whole bunch of people, Randy Ness was here. Everybody basically just loves this community because of the thoughtful feedback. So what I found is that many people, after watching this presentation by Chuck Spinney, told me that, oh, this was just mind-blowing and I could barely grasp, part of it. So I'm going to watch it again, and I'm going to watch it again, and I'm going to have more questions. And so I asked Chuck, I said, like lots of people, including myself, I'm watching it multiple times to try to figure it out. So would you come back and answer some questions? So he said, sure, but I don't want to just take random questions. How do we manage that? So I said, we are going to just go slide by slide. So if you really think that OODA Loop has some value, this is your chance. So, and the other thing he said, you know what, we should also get Chet Richards, who is the other guy who has spent 20 years with John Boyd. So both of them are going to be back on the 13th, Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And we are going to go through the slides one by one. And they're going to take all the questions that you can generate on the slides. Okay. So it is like, if you really want to know OODA Loop, there is really no better way possible. I still can't believe that that's happening. Okay. But it is truly, truly magnificent, truly magnificent. So again, so I think OODA Loop is very powerful. And this point was brought up by many people. Joe talked about it. Marisa started by discussing, kind of destruction and creation. And so let's start with OODA Loop, and let's see how it is connected. Let's use, now both Kevin and Jeff had like a structure of it. I mean, basically the structure, for example, Jeff's structure is that you have to realize there are lots of unknown unknowns. There are things that you don't even know you don't know. Okay. So that's kind of ignorance. That's kind of, it's almost like emptying the vessel, emptying your premises and being kind of open to the world. And then he had a bunch of things, and then OODA Loop at the end. Kevin had put OODA Loop as a technique. Marissa started by talking about OODA Loop first, of saying, destruction and creation. So let's start with that. And so firstly, so the question is, can you connect it to the other things that are there? So for example, what is the connection between embracing ignorance and OODA Loop? What is the connection between, let's say, order and chaos and OODA Loop? What is the connection between form follows function and the OODA Loop? So you can pick anything, any one thing, idea, or some other idea that you have. What about multiple hypotheses in OODA Loop? And let's see if we can have some observations on that. So anybody can go ahead and just type an exclamation mark. Andrew.
Yeah, hi. I just think it's really interesting that people are really drawn to the OODA Loop, and I am too. And I think it's interesting because to me, the OODA Loop is almost like the most common experience, maybe, because mostly it's describing kind of a cognitive process. It's something that we already do. We observe things, we take actions based on what we think, we get feedback, we kind of reconceive or refine our conceptual model. We do have confirmation bias that plays into then our perception. So like, this is just like daily life kind of stuff. And I think it's interesting that we're all so attracted to that. I think in part it's because it's like, oh yeah, whether you're conscious of it or not, it's like, oh yeah, that's actually how my life works. That's how my brain works. And so I just wanted to point that out. And I think just with regard to multiple working hypotheses, that's a little bit a contrast almost to the OODA Loop, because in the OODA Loop, you don't go into it, that process, you don't start with multiple hypotheses. You have a hypothesis or a concept or whatever, and you take action, and then you learn, okay, does that work or it doesn't work? So, that's kind of interesting. That's like making posing one hypothesis and testing it, as opposed to going in a priori with multiple hypotheses. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the way in which I see OODA Loop connecting with multiple hypotheses is that, think of it as like most people, I mean, this is the question I want to ask Chuck and Chet. Most of the times people think of OODA Loop only in the context of competition. But it's also important that OODA Loop, operates in every context, including cooperation. So imagine a team, like here are a bunch of us, right? We're talking and we're trying to learn from each other. And what we're doing is that think of all of us have different orientations, and we are all talking. And in the process of talking, we are readjusting our orientations. So it's like a team working together is like multiple hypotheses, multiple orientations being put on the table, interacting with each other through action and through words, doing reworking of each of the orientations to have some kind of a common orientation. We'll continue to have separateness of orientation, but some commonality that develops, which serves as a basis for action, something like that. So I think that's really, really fascinating. All right, next up is Judith, Joe, and Maritza. Judith.
Yeah, so for the OODA loop, what I found most interesting was that positive feedback loop that he talked about, that just amplifies itself and you run into chaos. So that like links with, I don't have your list in front of me, but like, you know, Jordan Peterson, or just like questioning our own, that's another one I'm really big about these days, but just like, where are you getting your belief systems from? Are they things you've told yourself? How long have you been telling yourself these things? Is it things your family, your culture has told you? You know, there are so many things we just take for granted. And I think that falls in that category of the OODA loop. And it's so easy to get there and not even realize that you are in that loop until maybe you're into big chaos, you know? So I found that really interesting. And I guess it has those, you know, connections with the other topics.
Yeah, I mean, that point is great. I mean, the point about positive feedback versus negative feedback. I mean, we yearn for positive feedback, but that's something that positive feedback will just keep reinforcing whatever it is, or whatever it is that you hold, and really doesn't change the orientation based on the feedback you're getting. So in order to grow, you have to be open to negative feedback. And so that's a great point. Next up is Joe, Maritza, and Kevin. Joe?
Actually, I just want to maybe clarify is that idea of when we say negative feedback, that's just counter to what we actually were thinking. It's not necessarily a negative outcome, right?
That's right. The distinction that Chuck was making was that what happens in case of positive feedback is that there is a link from orientation to observation. The orientation shapes what you observe. So it's classic case of the confirmation bias, right? Where you're saying you're only going to look at evidence that supports your position. You're actually looking for evidence that supports your position. If you see something that doesn't really support your position, you ignore it. It doesn't really catch your attention. So that's what creates the positive feedback that just keeps on reinforcing the position. And again, using John Boyd's ideas, by doing that, it gets progressively out of sync with reality, because it is just feeding on itself. In order to have a corrective mechanism, you have to actually be open to negative feedback and say, I really screwed up. I was expecting this. And many times what happens is that all of that shows up at the edge of your consciousness. And the question is, are you going to pay attention to this thing that is happening here? You can actually see it in the peripheral vision. Are you going to move your gaze and put focus on it? Or are you going to turn away from it? So that's...
Actually, that makes sense, the way you just said that, actually. Or where are you?
Right, and it connects with, ideas of Carl Jung about facing your shadow, of going through fear, in filth it shall be found. All of that is all about saying, being willing to take that negative hit in order to grow. Next up is Maritza, followed by Kevin.
So looking at them, in the OODA loop here, what comes to mind for me is how it ties in with the great traditions of inquiry and action. Because, in that discussion, we talked about Sapolsky's, his concerns where, he talked about, his list of dangers of categorical thinking. And, he was saying, we might miss the big picture by focusing on boundaries and by underestimating differences of, what do you say, like the difference between two objects where they may happen to fall into the same category. Just because they're lumped together, we may fail to distinguish. And I find that part of what the OODA loop is telling us is the same thing, where, you have to observe and reorient, like, just because they were initially lumped into that one category together, it might be more advantageous in this situation for them to be separate and distinct based on a difference between them that in the previous iteration was not that important. And so it was okay for them to be categorized together. So that's how I see that kind of tying in. And the exciting thing is that also brings in the element of, if we're failing to acknowledge the, what does he call it? He calls it humanity's great traditions, right? So you're talking, again, we're standing upon the backs of all the knowledge of our ancestry. And there's that cultural aspect. And there's that, if you're doing the OODA loop without considering that data also, maybe you're not getting as good a picture. And maybe part of the reorienting is to include this data of knowledge that perhaps in general, or maybe not in general, because we're talking generalists, but perhaps when your blinders on, zooming in on one thing, you fail to account for it. And it might seem insignificant, but if you take and include it, you may be surprised to find that it provides you just that one little magical piece you needed to restructure the path towards your action.
Wonderful. I want to just talk about my favorite quote by Sapolsky, and that is he says, "Strong opinions weakly held."
Yes, yes.
Because that actually captures it. It has to be strong opinions, because you actually have to act on them. You have to say, this is what I believe to the best of my ability, and I'm going to act on it with full force. And then weakly held in the sense that you are open to the fact that you're wrong.
And that leads back to the quote of, the moment you fall in love with your idea, it starts to die.
Yes.
That's the weakly held. You can't
Yes.
hold too tight.
Yes. And I find on all of this, the John Boyd's Destruction and Creation paper, it's just like 6 pages, but it's the most powerful. Thank you. Kevin.
Yes, sir. Yeah, actually, for high tech, we talk about agile. They even used to be the code still like use that kind of concept. For example, we use PDCA, there's plan, doing, then sees check, then as act is kind. And we let's see in the inside the circle use PDCA, and in organization they do that too. Feedback from HR from different loop. Also, I would say if you use the PDCA, it's both sides. We talk about in deductive attitude. We also need deductive attitude, right? Attitude opposite is a forward feedback, backward feedback, positive, negative. We need everything put together. We treat equally. It's not, let's see, we only, I'm sorry to say the politician, we all, that's a typical example. We only talk about good. What are we going to achieve? And a day, nobody is responsible. What's promised? I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Kevin. I mean, this is very important point. It's like induction and deduction. That both are continual processes. So you have to have inductive attitude, but you also have to have deductive attitude. In the sense, you have to act and apply all the ideas that you have. So you have to, complete. It's like you're going up in potential when you're trying to induce, you're trying to pull together something, and then you kind of apply it deductively, and then look at the results and then induce again. So both, that's the basic idea of, I think John Boyd calls it the creative induction, the first deductive destruction, because you can't really build anything until you're prepared to destroy what you have. And so deductive destruction and creative induction. Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Jeff, followed by Laura. Jeff.
So Shrikanta, I want to build on the things that you were just saying with Marita and Kevin. I just sort of put a funny thing together for myself. I'm not even sure if it's appropriate to put these two things together, but I do realize that I think that I'm seeking to maintain and even increase my capacity for independent action by always exploring multiple working hypotheses. That it saves me from saying this is the way it is, and this is the only way it is. This is the one true theory. Well, maybe, given what I know at the moment, but also given my respect for what I don't know that I don't know, I need to keep exploring multiple working hypotheses, and I want to maintain my ability to do it. Anyway, that's all. I just thought I'd offer that sort of observation regarding. I think that's the formula that I'm pursuing in my own thinking over and over again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks. Next up is Laura. Laura, what do you think of OODA Loop and its connection with other ideas? Laura, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I like OODA Loop. I think it would be I think it's a good point of departure. I was wondering, thinking about all of this, if it would be an interesting tool to look at how people think differently. So if we wanted to sort of understand the difference between African American and white people, maybe this would be a better, more profound way of getting at it than we normally do, so that maybe we would understand that they see chaos, ignorance, destruction, or they see destructive. How do they perceive it using these things from OODA Loop, destruction and creation, and looking at how they see the world from these perspectives, and in what order maybe how they see them versus how we see them. Is there ever any point at which we would have equity in this? How can we maybe help to, I hate to say engineer things in a way that, we can create community, or begin to create community through some, understanding, so that we have form to function. We can build systems that work, so that we can proceed forward without always having to have some incident, the horrible incident that occurs that wakes us up to, oh yeah, we're, they've got to work on this, and then it disappears because we don't know what we're looking for. And we talk about equity. We don't talk about equality anymore. We finally realize we're never going to hit equality. But we don't even know what it really means to say equity, per se. It's tangibles. Yeah, we'll get, every kid will have a thing, a piece of technology. This will be like this. But I think it's these deeper issues that we really ought to be getting at. So it's our job from this group to begin to think of how we could do that, because we should be learning by doing. That's what we need to do. And we should get something out of it that might do something powerful for society.
Okay, thank you. Next up is going to be Judith.
So I have a question about the OODA Loop. So I don't know, maybe I'm supposed to wait and ask.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead. Folks, you can ask questions or make comments anytime. Go ahead.
Yeah, so because now I'm looking at the little thing that I drew. And so I understood, like how this could fall apart, or how you could use this against the enemy to create chaos, and interfere with their feedback loop. But the actual decision making, right? He talked about Fingerspitzengefühl and use the existing repertoire. And so I don't understand how that effectively, but what do you tell the Marines to make that effectively play out? I didn't really even get a sense for it. Can you help me with that?
Oh yeah, sure. What they're essentially saying is that it is not enough to have these ideas. You have to build them into almost muscle memory. You have to make it so that they are implicit, that they work subconsciously, because once you are on the field, you are in the middle of action, you have to be able to count on a whole bunch of things which are automatic. At the same time, this finger, whatever it is, I don't know how to pronounce it, that is like having almost like your fingers on what is going on, your fingers on the pulse. And that is being able to see what the situation is and be able to grasp things and react to things almost at an automatic level. So one of the big points that Chuck was making is that there is a lot happening at the system one level. And you have to respect that. You have to see that, that's what needs to actually happen. System one needs to do a lot. So you kind of work. That's what training is all about, of kind of pushing things of what you need to be doing into your system one. That's the best. But Judith, go ahead and ask this question to Chuck and Chet when they show up on the 13th. It's a great question. All right. And, with Laura's observation, all I would say is that, in order to understand world's problems, and what we're talking about here is really kind of epistemology, the way of thinking, really, that's what we're talking about. And what happens is that different cultures, whether across the world or subcultures within a country, have kind of dominant ideas, dominant ways of operating. It is very there is history of how it comes to be. They are malleable, but they're not infinitely malleable. And to kind of think about all of that and work on all of that, it's a very large issue. And I certainly am not capable of doing anything much on that. I don't think I'm good at that. I mean, the things that if there is a tremendous commonality of interest, I'm able to do something. But in terms of being able to span great amount of distance in culture between, for example, here and let's say the Aborigines in Australia, I don't know how to do that. I really, my skills are very, very poor on that, on anything to do with something like politics. So that's one of the reasons we stay away from politics, and partly because what happens is that, another reason we stay out of politics. And I want to recommend another meetup on this Saturday at 5 p.m. It's a very interesting meetup. It's all about, it's by this guy, Bill Frezza. He's going to be talking about unplugging from the 24-hour news cycle and social media and building your own intellectual oasis. Because what happens is that people are just spending so many cycles in a reactive way using these media, whether it is TV, and it doesn't matter, what your political beliefs are, but people are just, going round and round. And there is a tremendous amount of incentive for people, who have these media to get, make people angry. Doesn't matter what direction, just get them angry so that they will do something. And the same thing that works on social media. And what is happening is that then you're spending most of the time reacting to things, reacting to the world. And you have no space to actually build something. And that's what he's going to be talking about. He did this experiment about, I think, 2 years ago. He just cut everything out. He was a very famous columnist. So he was public figure and just fully immersed in all these media and part of it. And he kind of stepped back, and he's going to be talking about the impact on that, on his life, of how does, not just life, but his mind. What happens to the mind when you do that? So that is one of the reasons I do think that politics is important, but I think the real value of this place is to kind of step back and to look at things. And then you can take it and apply it to whatever you think you should apply it to. But that's why I keep the focus on at a much higher level. All right. So let's see. All right. So we've talked about OODA Loop as a central piece and connecting other things to it. Let me see how we're doing on time. I want to take one other idea and connect it to all other ideas. And I'm asking for votes. So go ahead and just vote in the chat. Which idea would you like to connect to all other ideas? Folks, vote so that you will get to discuss the idea that you are most interested in. I'm going to give about a minute or so that you can put your votes down in the chat. Okay, so Kevin says embracing ignorance. So you got one for embracing ignorance. Mushki also wants to embrace ignorance. Form follows function is Maritza. Okay, embracing ignorance. Okay, you got 3-1. So there is, all right, let's do embracing ignorance. Let me just say Maritza has voted for this. So let me just say one thing about form follows function. We're going to do a series of almost 10 meetups on that. Okay. It's going to be amazing. We're going to try to look at Lois Sullivan. He's a master. I don't know how to approach him. He's very good. So I'm getting help from my friends Sherry and Rupali, who have been studying it for a long time. And then Maritza and Joya would be joining. So we'd have a panel of 4 people. And we're going to be going through one of his books. And the introduction to that is going to be this Saturday at 2:30. All right, so let's talk about embracing ignorance. How does embracing ignorance connect to the other ideas? Who would like to go first? How about people who voted for it? Let's start with Kevin. Kevin, how is embracing ignorance connected to the other ideas we're looking at?
Yeah, I would say that's a source. If let's see, bring it to my list here. It's a source of everything. Let's see, which I mentioned OODA Loop. It's from our beliefs, our values, and purpose. We need to, let's see, microwave kind of change. I keep changing, beliefs and to our action used with OODA Loop. And our knowledge, let's see, even simple, let's see, if the grade 1 school, the book, when I read it, I don't know much. When after 5 years, 10 years, even now I read it, it's a different taste. So our knowledge is keep changing from even the content itself is not much, but it's give me different feeling. Another one is, let's see, and we watch, let's say, yesterday I shared one, the tree. That's I guess you're gonna love this. Normally, the tree, let's see, draw a picture from art. Let's see, we never saw the root, right? We draw the trunk, a beautiful leaf, even flower. How about it? Let's see, bottom up. Let's the root on the top. How beautiful picture. Then you saw on the picture, bottom is the leaf. Let's go and change our thinking. That
wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. So let's start with Dave, Judith, and Maritza. Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Shrikant. To me, the link is embracing ignorance and the multiple working hypothesis. And because I think so often it's tempting to say, oh, I know what we need to do. Whatever the project is, whatever the crisis is, or whatever, to me, the best thing to do is say, I have no idea what to do. What do you think? And you throw it open to the people in the team. Okay, let's have some ideas. I'm going to go up here to the whiteboard. In my day, it was a chalkboard. And I'm going to write these down. And then we come back and we put pros and cons after each one. And we work on it, and whatever depth we need to, maybe we have to come back to a meeting next month or next week. Then we make a decision. And then you can go through the OODA loop and have your feedback and everything else. But so many times we shoot ourselves in the foot when you say, oh, I know what we need to do, and you really don't, or it calls for a more creative solution, or it's the opportunity for a breakthrough. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great observation, Dave. I mean, this is a very fundamental thing. I found, I mean, I really didn't know this for most of my life. And just kind of, I'm still discovering it, of saying that instead of trying to do everything yourself, like, for example, embracing ignorance, multiple hypotheses, trying to do it yourself, if you involve other people, that provides a really robust feedback mechanism. Because even if you say, okay, I'm considering multiple hypotheses, you're going to be biased by what you select. You know, you're going to select only certain kinds of things. Whereas if you actually go out and get stuff from other people, it's going to not only increase the hypothesis in the range of the hypothesis, but it's also going to be, it also is same as they were saying, is about embracing your ignorance, because each of them are going to actually show you some ignorance that you have by genuinely trying to see where they're coming from. So thank you, Dave. Next up is Judith, Maritza, and Joe. Judith.
I wanted to address Mushki's question about in the chat about how to, deal with cognitive dissonance. Is that how you should put it? When dealing with multiple hypotheses. So the way I think of it is if you just imagine all the great people in the world that have ever lived, that are living now, have done amazing things, and that they were ignorant in some ways. They didn't know everything. They were proven wrong later on sometimes. So the idea to have a lot of ideas out there shouldn't really be threatening. It should be more like exciting. And then the other interesting thing about having, looking at different ideas, I don't know whether they're hypotheses the way I'm saying it, but like we do in these meetups, for example, and connecting those dots, it sort of distills out some truths eventually. Like certain things just keep resurfacing, and like you're looking at it at a different angle, but it's giving you the same answer. And then you just feel stronger about it, So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
That's great points, Judith. And I will add to that is that actually when you look at multiple hypotheses and you start looking at it, there is cognitive dissonance, because our subconscious, our system one, yearns for one. You want one picture, you want certainty, and that is what is being challenged when you are considering multiple hypotheses. So there is some cognitive dissonance that you have to be willing to put up with when you move from one hypothesis to another. So some level of kind of discomfort, some level of facing uncertainty. So I'm going to go to Mushki and then we'll go to others. Mushki, go ahead.
Yes, so I don't think every time you have multiple hypotheses, it's going to be cognitive dissonance. I do think we could only live out one reality at a time. So we can have multiple hypotheses on an idea, but we could only live out one idea at a time. So we kind of have to pick one of the hypotheses, and try it out. and then there's always the like, what if I pick the wrong hypotheses, you know? And then I'm still entertaining the other hypotheses while I'm living out one hypothesis. If, so that's this what I mean here in this case about the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, another way of looking at it is the Julian Jaynes idea of you in your mental space projecting out multiple possibilities. You know, what if I followed this hypothesis? Where would I? What if I followed that hypothesis? What? So yeah, it's a way of kind of actually simulating different possibilities and running kind of multiple simulations to say, okay, which one seems better, instead of just going with one. Next up is Maritza, Joe, and Kevin. Maritza.
I just want to piggyback a little bit on what you just said, Shrikant. I wanted to point out that the concept of the multiple working hypotheses was presented, like, just to kind of say that, if we're diligent in practicing, in practicing the handling of several different hypotheses co-equally. And I remember that because I thought that was a weird phrasing. So co-equally, then what that does for us is it stops us from either overstating an individual hypothesis or losing sight of our ignorance. So what I believe was being stated there is that we should always acknowledge that every hypothesis has kind of like a Gemini, like what do you call it, a conjoined twin. And that twin is ignorance. So, remember, it's a hypothesis. This is not concretized fact yet, it's hypothesis. So it is not without ignorance. So if we're looking at them as many sets of possibilities, every possibility includes with it an element of ignorance, and we are far more prone to forgetting that or ignoring it if we only look at one possibility. When we look at several, well, it increases the magnitude of ignorance, right? You're gonna see more, and by doing that, it does allow you just a slightly better perspective and maybe you'll come across a different path forward. And maybe if it's not necessarily cognitive dissonance, there is, a disparity there that will be identified by looking at a broader scope.
I have a half-baked idea, which is kind of combination of multiple hypotheses. I've never been able to do much with it, but combination of multiple hypotheses with Bayesian thinking, Bayes rule. Because Bayes rule is when you're updating your beliefs, you're saying you hold this hypothesis or this belief, and you're going and acting based on it, and then you're updating the belief based on the results. Now, one of the problems with it is that it depends on what you believe you started out with, because that's the only thing that you're testing. So that's one problem of selection of hypotheses. The second problem from multiple hypotheses is that, well, some of the hypotheses may be well off. It doesn't mean that all hypotheses are equally good or will turn out to be equally good at describing reality. And you need some kind of a mechanism to keep going through. And why should you go for only a fixed set of hypotheses? You should be looking for more hypotheses. And there has to be like a competition of hypotheses. So it's like kind of, it's just the half-baked idea is kind of use the combination of the two, where you have a certain set of hypotheses. You can't have infinite number, but let's say 5 hypotheses. And then you are running these kind of updating cycles on all of them. So you're saying, if I did this, what would I expect? Am I seeing that? And anything that kind of falls down, you have these other candidates hypotheses in your kitty. Moment a hypothesis falls off, says, okay, that is lost. Now let me get that one in. and let me run that. So that's how it is very half-baked, because I've never actually done that.
But that's cool, because it actually ties perfectly into the, you know, embracing of ignorance, because that's the Bayesian, you know, the concept is that, you know, there's more
Right.
to be known.
But it seems to give a kind of more stability, because you're not kind of depending on just one thing. You're actually seeing kind of multiple ways. And over time, all the hypotheses that survive will have some kind of usefulness, but they will be slightly different from each other. So they may actually work in some situations a little bit better. So that's what I was thinking of. Not really, I have to run. I've never really done anything with it, but it's like that. But it's like, you know, I mean, the way in which you can look at it is that you can look at, like, we're looking at Donald Merlin, right? Or the Center for Study for Digital Life folks. They look at these different stages, right? So for example, Mythic Age has a way, so their hypothesis is in terms of stories. And so you can think of your life in terms of stories, or you can think of your life in terms of science. You can think of your life in terms of industry or technology or something, and see which, you know, which one is going to give you a better, you know, results of thinking, because all of those are kind of simultaneously active in you. So it's a way of kind of looking at, you know, combination of like these great traditions of inquiry across time with multiple hypotheses being tested using the updating mechanism. Joe.
So I have like more of I have a question at the end of this, but the idea is that initially where I think of how ignorance fits into the OODA loop is that it allows you to deal with the unknown. Because let's think about the OODA loop in its truest form. It's pretty much the scientific method, right? With the orientation phase.
Yep.
So then how does ignorance then play into that? And that's where Stuart Firestein's idea is that, you know, you're talking about the questions, not the answers, and how you even look at data, and then how can you reimagine it within, you know, what is even possible, and then how do you then orient and make a decision within that process. So, but I was wondering how the OODA loop would work with the Center for Digital Life's perspective on how it's breaking down like communications and with how digital is changing how we communicate with each other, because that's an interesting question. Because I don't know if the OODA loop necessarily fits with everything that they say.
Good. Okay, very interesting. I will, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't have a good answer, but it's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah, because it looks for patterns, right? At a certain point. And I thought this through earlier, and basically, even though it helps you deal with unknown, does it help you deal with unknown unknowns?
Yeah, I mean, the way in which, if I wanted to kind of connect it, it's like each of the ages, right? You have these different ages. You have the scribal, print, television, and the OODA loop. The feedback mechanism, the action mechanism, and the feedback mechanism is dependent on the medium that you're using. So for example, at the oral stage, the entire feedback mechanism you have is just the people around you. That's all the feedback you have. So the OODA loop operates with almost like a family, you know, it's like your tribe. You're going around with them, and there is a OODA loop operating there. Moment you go to a scribal level, the OODA loops, the distance becomes, the loops become larger. With printing, they become even larger. With TV, they speed up dramatically. You know, it is instantaneous broadcasting of all of this. So it's a question of kind of, I think, geography and speed and all of it put together. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I mean, it's like,
I'm sorry, can I jump in for
Please.
just one second here?
Please.
There was something in going through that, I spent way too much time on that last essay, the 42-page one. Something I saw with what they were showing us of the cogitative sense was that they were pointing in the essay to the fact that the cogitative directs the process of the observation of facts, and that this could be translated to knowledge through technique and experience. And I think if we look at it from that perspective, it's a little bit easier to see how it would fit into the OODA loop. At least I think so, because it's moving us from the abstract to the concrete, or the concrete to the abstract, and that would be the observe, orient, act, the same movement. It's kind of like a ladder. I had envisioned this as a ladder, but now what Joe said is kind of shifting it in my brain more into the OODA loop shape. So, I mean, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it makes sense to me that it would fit into that banner in some sense, in that it's it's that abstract to concrete that makes it there. Does that make
Maritza, you're absolutely right. Okay, you're absolutely right. It's exactly that. Okay, I mean, it's actually complete parallel. I mean, you know, I started by talking about the different ages, but if you look at the structure of the inner senses, and especially the cogitative sense, I mean, after I read the essay, it's like it's identical to the OODA loop. Okay, it's what you're saying is what Aquinas is saying is that the cogitative sense takes input from the senses. It goes through imagination, producing different possibilities, and that goes into the cogitative sense. So it's the orienting. So cogitative sense is the reorienting mechanism. Okay, which is like the linchpin of the OODA loop. So it takes in everything from here, right? Including observations from the senses, you know, common sense, that it's all coming in, right? It is taking in from memory. That means all your past orientations, all your past experience, all of it is taking in, right? And what is it doing? It is producing an appraisal. It is producing, this is what I need to do. It's a decision. It's saying that this is what I need to do. And then you are acting based on that. That's what, you know, they say it is like the heart of prudence, of saying, this is what is good. My highest values will be made concrete in this context by doing this. And that's the result of it. And then you are continuously observing, you continue to do that. And so it is the same thing as far as I can see. What do you think?
well,
Go ahead, Joe.
no, I'm trying to figure it out, because that actually makes sense to me. But then I remember what Mark said is something about us being a biological system, and systems thinking is not necessarily the approach.
Oh, that's very different. That's a very different thing. Here we're just talking about this. This is what we're talking
The inner
about.
sense. Okay.
Here we're talking about Aquinas' view of human beings, of human faculties, and comparing that to Boyd's view of what human beings do. And it is analogous.
So is that being in someone else's OODA loop in that case?
No, we are not talking about other people.
Okay.
Here. We are simply talking about how do you live. So the way in which Aquinas thinks about it is that you observe reality, it's going to hit your imagination sense, which is going to produce different possibilities. And then the cogitative sense, which is the orienting mechanism,
Okay.
is going to connect that to take those patterns and form a concept. And then that is going to produce an appraisal. of saying, because this is who I am, this is what is going on, this is what I should be doing. And that is going to trigger all the emotions and motivation for action, which is going to lead to action.
Okay.
So it is kind of, so the first part is the creative induction part. And the second part is the application or the deductive destruction part. So it's really, Maritza just got it. Maritza, you read the paper well.
I read it more than once. It it needed a second pass through.
Yes.
One small quick thing I
Mhm.
want to mention also to Joe, you know, where you're talking about that perceived, maybe the disparity with the systems thinking, you know, they also talk about that the prudential syllogism, and that's telling you, in view of the circumstance of the time, place, and persons in which you find yourself in this moment, then I must keep the information I have to myself. So I think that addresses that question of, you know, when he was saying it's not a systems thinking, that's what he means. Not that it's like a total break, but that when you are in this processing instant, it has to be dealt with the info you have. Sometimes there needs to be a separation between all the information and what you have now. And that's where you're going. That's the movement and the reorienting. And that, at least how I see it.
Thank you, Maritza. Next up is going to be Mike. Mike, I have to learn how to talk to you. So that, Mike, are you there?
Yeah, that might,
right.
learning how to talk to me might be dangerous.
I've tried many things. So one, I give you time limits. Second, I say remain on topic, which is very hard for you to do. But many times, you know, you have a brilliant mind, so you can go sideways, and you're able to come back. But sometimes you go sideways, and you disappear way out there, and you lose a lot of people. So what's the best way of handling this, Mike?
Well, let me free run for a few minutes.
Oh, no, few minutes is too much. How about 2 minutes?
All right. Well,
2 minutes.
for 30 seconds, and then you can decide what the point is.
Okay. How about this? We do resetting, not resetting, but redirecting every 30 seconds.
That's a feedback loop.
Feedback loop. Yes. Let's do a feedback loop. Let's see how that works.
Okay.
Okay.
The OODA loop is a special case of Russell Ackoff's papers on system thinking. And in fact, several things during that discussion, Tom Gilb asked a couple perceptive questions, which were never really answered, of what is the objective, what kind of transfer.
Sure. The objective, Tom just missed that. The objective of the OODA loop is always the same. It is to increase your capacity for independent action.
Okay, I propose that the objective is a numerical, and in Boyd's situation is a numerical situation of increasing the kill probability of his situation, which can be stated numerically. Now, similarly, but I take it 2 steps further. Every single thing on your list is a special case of Russell Ackoff's thing.
You're doing, Mike, you're doing amazingly well. So please keep going.
Okay. And there's another guy who wrote wrote on Russell Ackoff stuff, on Russell Ackoff's team, named Harvey Wagner, and because remember that they said the problem was, what's the look at what is the difference between these 2 pictures, and it was positive feedback, negative feedback. Now, there's some very, control system theory has a definition of positive feedback and negative feedback. Positive feedback, but they both have a role in correcting the result that you have. So to either amplify a good result or dampen down a bad result. Now, in order to make that work, you need an objective function. And you're often handling apples and oranges in doing the objective functions. And there's a defined procedure for doing that. And one of the things is well, I won't go into that.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. So
yeah.
that is one way of doing kind of not resetting, but redirecting.
Dampening my excursions.
Yes, yes. So you said that there is a way in which positive feedback can be used. So whenever the positive feedback is maximizing the thing that you're trying to maximize, you turn up, you use the positive feedback, right? So for example, here you're trying to increase your capacity for independent action. So anything that is doing that, you're using that. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Okay. You also said that OODA loop is a special case of Ackoff's system theory. How so?
Okay. If you look at my picture there, that is an OODA loop with about 15 boxes of the girl jumping rope that we talked about in Sanjay's example. Now, the issue is every single one of those lines is not a real line, is not a simple line. It's a Bayesian theory. It's a Bayesian probability distribution. And there are techniques in system theory for solving those problems and computing stability. Bell Labs is one of the places where some of that came out of. And Bell Labs wasn't just a telephone company. They built the Nike system of missiles that was our first anti-aircraft defense and our first missile defense.
So, Mike, what does having such large number of OODA loops together do that a single OODA loop cannot?
Well, you're not just deciding when to pull the trigger. You're deciding about 40 other things. How much acceleration, how much altitude to drop in that particular case, which direction to go, where the plane is going to be when the missile, the tow missile or whatever actually gets there. There's a whole list of things that you have to decide that are all probabilistic. Now, in the case what Joe said, there's hundreds of things. How do you evaluate alternate proposals? Generally, an alternate proposal represents some effect that you're trying to either use in your design or ignore. And ignoring it at your parallel or including it and giving it a weighting function and a probability distribution that can be empirically determined.
Wonderful.
So, I don't know if you can see that. I didn't ask to share my picture.
Right.
On the right is a loop, and then is the girl jumping rope. And on the left, I put in an oversimplification of it, which took care of some. And actually, that's all fiction because I haven't empirically measured any of the numbers and probability.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. It was 6 minutes, 16 seconds, but this was very effective. I think we have found a way of talking. Mike, all I have to do is to ask you questions every 30 seconds or between 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And then it becomes really beautiful.
Now, every other one of the things that you've got there We've included Bayesian thinking, but every other one of those things involve a special case which needs to be considered of Russell Ackoff's systems thinking.
Wonderful.
And he stood on the shoulders of giants too.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Let's
Enough.
Yes, let's.
Tom Gilb, if you listen to the thing, Tom Gilb and I tried to drive the OODA Loop discussion into that kind of direction.
Wonderful.
Somewhat unsuccessfully.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Appreciate that. At 7 minutes, fantastic, Mike. This was good. This was very productive 7 minutes. All right, folks. Anybody else? Any comments? Any thoughts?
Yeah,
I have one more thing that I should.
No. Mike.
One more thing.
One sentence.
Pushki did add a comment in her thing about how about tying this into psycho-cybernetics.
Later, Mike. Let's give other people chance. Kevin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just now we talk about embracing the ignorance, like Muskie and Joe and Marisa. I'll say this: we have illusion like we have only one choice, like either right or wrong. It's not like that. We normally make decision which is better. I got one loop like this. We can embrace ignorance, then use OODA loop. You until reorientation, you got a multiple working hypotheses. Then you select one. That's one. Either it's like all roads lead to Roma, right? You can choose one, but that one doesn't mean it's the best. You think the best, or maybe in reality execute is not, but that's the reality. By the way, for back to the Joseph question about the center city, how about this? Let's see, maybe OODA loop also happen in the nature selection. In itself, it's OODA loop, minor change, that's evolving come. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So on embracing ignorance, I mean, I am terrible at it. I try, but I think I just hold on to things too long. I think in some, so I continuously. So I think one of the advantages of talking to people is that you get to actually discover your ignorances faster. Also, I try to speak, and the rate at which what I say changes is quite a bit, actually. So it's really I have to learn a lot about embracing ignorance. I don't think I'm particularly good at it. So it's a huge deal, huge deal. All right, folks. So I think this was an amazing discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it.